I'm a receptionist at a Frankfurt conference center, and we had an American consultant scheduled for a 2 p.m. meeting with a German automotive firm. He strolled in at 2:17 p.m., coffee in hand, smiling like he'd just conquered traffic. The Germans were already standing outside the conference room. Not sitting inside waiting. Standing outside, coats on, briefcases in hand. When I buzzed them, the senior partner asked in perfect English, "Is he not coming?" They'd already left. The American looked at me confused. "What do you mean they left? I'm only like 15 minutes late. That's basically on time." He then explained that in America, arrival windows are flexible. Everyone knows 2 p.m. really means 2:15 p.m. It's just how business works, and Germans should adapt to international norms. He pulled out his phone to show me his calendar, as if the timestamp on his appointment would somehow validate his point. I watched him dial their office. They didn't answer. I work at a Munich train station information desk, and this woman from Texas approached asking why her ICE train to Hamburg left without her. She arrived at 10:03 a.m. for a 10 a.m. departure. I explained trains here depart exactly on schedule. She said, "Well, in America, a 10 a.m. train means you board around 10 a.m. Plus I had to get coffee first. Nobody functions without coffee. That's just basic human rights." She insisted German rail schedules must account for reasonable delays. According to her, the entire German railway system had poor customer service because Deutsche Bahn should hold trains for at least 10 minutes, minimum, since real people need buffer time. She asked to speak with my supervisor about implementing more realistic departure times. She's currently waiting at platform 7 for the 11 a.m. train. I told her to arrive at 10:50 a.m. She laughed and said she'd be there at 11:05 a.m. because that's what made sense. My brother manages a Heidelberg pharmacy, and an American tourist came in asking why we closed at 1 p.m. on Saturdays. She needed aspirin at 1:08 p.m. The door was locked. She knocked, saw him inside doing inventory, and knocked louder. When he opened the door to explain our hours, she said, "But you're right there. The lights are on." This is technically still business hours because in America, closing time means you can still serve customers for 15 or 20 minutes after. She suggested that German stores were being rigid, and that closing times should be treated as suggestions. She actually said European retail needed to be more dynamic like American stores. She stood there for 5 minutes explaining how Target in Houston lets people in until 10:15 p.m. even though they close at 10 p.m. I'm a tour guide in Cologne, and I led an American family through the cathedral. The father asked if we could start the tour at 3:15 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. because they wanted lunch first. I said the tour begins at 3 p.m. sharp, and he replied, "Right, so 3:15 p.m. Nobody actually means exactly 3 p.m. I clarified that we depart the entrance at precisely 3 p.m. He laughed and said, "That's psychotic. Time isn't that precise. You're telling me if someone shows up at 2:59 p.m. versus 3:01 p.m., there's a difference." I told him yes, one person respects everyone else's schedule. He spent the entire walk through the cathedral explaining how American flexibility makes society function better because rigid time obsession is just control issues. He brought up California traffic as evidence that approximate timing works fine. His wife kept apologizing. When we finished at 4:30 p.m., he checked his watch and said, "See, it's 4:32 p.m. Nobody cares." I pointed out that he made us 2 minutes late by stopping to take photos when I said we needed to move along. My cousin is a government clerk in Stuttgart, and an American came to register his residence 3 weeks after moving in. The legal requirement is within 2 weeks. The American said, "Yeah, but that's just a guideline, right? In California, nobody registers anything on time." The DMV tells you 30 days, but everyone knows you have like 60, maybe 90 days realistically. My cousin explained that German law means exactly what it states. The man responded that German bureaucracy needed to read between the lines, because strict deadlines were outdated European thinking. He genuinely argued that modern societies operate on flexible interpretations of rules. He cited parking tickets in Los Angeles being negotiable as proof that all regulations everywhere should work the same way. He got fined €50. He tried to negotiate the fine down to €25 because that's what it'd be in America after you explain the situation. He paid the full amount. Before leaving, he asked if Germany planned to modernize their registration system to be less hostile to newcomers. I work at a Berlin dental clinic, and we had an American patient scheduled at 9 a.m. He arrived at 9:23 a.m. When my colleague mentioned he'd missed his slot, he said, "I'm here now though. Just see me next. There's only one person ahead of me." She explained he'd need to reschedule. He insisted that in America, doctors' offices always run late anyway, so arriving 20 minutes after your appointment just means less waiting room time. He pulled out his phone to show her reviews of dentists in Phoenix who were always behind schedule. Then he pivoted to arguing that German precision was actually inefficient because it didn't account for traffic, weather, or coffee shop lines. He said American healthcare, despite its flaws, understood human nature better. Nobody gets anywhere exactly on time. It's literally impossible. Your system penalizes people for being normal. He booked another appointment for next week at 11 a.m. I guarantee he arrives at 11:20 a.m. minimum. I'm a parking enforcement officer in Nuremberg, and I ticketed an American's car parked in a residential zone overnight. He found me the next morning and complained that he didn't see any signs saying he couldn't park there after 8 p.m. I pointed to the sign directly above where his car had been. He said, "Okay, but that sign's in German. How am I supposed to know what it means?" I told him there's a universal red circle with a line through it showing no parking. He responded that the symbol was unclear and that American parking signs use English words because symbols alone are confusing. He then explained that in Florida, parking violations are suggestions and everybody parks wherever because enforcement is lenient. He said Germany should adopt America's practical approach to parking because tourists shouldn't be punished for not speaking German. He insisted the €30 fine was excessive compared to American tickets, which he claimed were usually warnings. I checked his license plate. He had 2 other tickets from Munich and Frankfurt. When I mentioned this, he said those were also unfair because he was still learning the system. My friend works at a traditional Bavarian beer hall in Munich, and an American couple walked in without a reservation during Oktoberfest. The hall was completely full. Every table had guests. The man asked how long the wait would be, and my friend said there's no waiting list since they don't hold tables. You need a reservation or you come back another time. The man replied, "So you're telling me there's no way to get a table?" My friend said correct. The man then argued that American restaurants always find room for people because good service means accommodating customers. He explained that in Texas, restaurants make it work even when they're slammed. His wife suggested maybe they just seat people outside, and my friend pointed out that outside was also full. The man said, "This is why Germany's restaurant industry isn't as successful as America's. You guys are too rigid. Just put another table somewhere." He stood near the entrance for 15 minutes watching for someone to leave. When a table of 8 Germans got up, he rushed over. My friend explained they had a reservation at that table in 10 minutes. The man said, 10 minutes is enough time for us to eat. They left to find a McDonald's. I work behind the counter at a Berlin bakery, and an American woman ordered a pretzel. I handed it to her with a napkin. She asked where the butter was. I told her we don't serve butter with pretzels. She looked confused and said, "What do you mean? How do people eat them?" "In America, pretzels come with butter or cheese sauce, it's standard." I explained that German pretzels are eaten plain. She replied, "That's so dry. Who decided that? You guys should offer toppings like normal places." I told her this is a traditional German bakery, we serve traditional items. She said, "Yeah, but traditions can be improved. America improved pizza, improved hamburgers, improved beer. You'd make way more money if you offered customization." She actually suggested I bring it up to my manager. She spent 5 minutes explaining how American food service understands customer preference. Then she bought the pretzel, took one bite, and came back to ask if we had any spreads at all. I offered mustard. She said, "That's not butter." She ate half and left the rest. My uncle is a head waiter at a Frankfurt fine dining restaurant, and an American party of 4 stayed at their table until 11:30 p.m. after finishing their meal at 9 p.m. They were drinking water, having already declined dessert and coffee. My uncle politely mentioned the restaurant closes at midnight. The American man said, "Right, so we have 30 more minutes. What's the problem?" My uncle clarified that closing time means staff are cleaning and preparing to lock up, and most guests leave 15 to 20 minutes before closing. The man replied, "In America, closing time means that's when you stop seating people. If we're already here, we can stay until midnight, that's how it works." He insisted that German restaurants had weird unspoken rules that nobody explains. He said American hospitality is superior because they let customers relax. One woman in his group even said, "You guys need to learn from the Cheesecake Factory. They never rush anyone." Another man at the table mentioned that in Chicago, he'd stayed in a restaurant 2 hours past closing and staff were fine with it. My uncle brought the check. They stayed until 11:58 p.m. As they walked out, the American man told my uncle he'd leave a better Yelp review if the service was less pushy. I'm a cafe manager in Hamburg, and an American ordered a latte at 5 p.m. She took one sip and came back to the counter saying it was cold. I made it 3 minutes ago. The machine was set to proper temperature. She insisted it wasn't hot enough and that in America, coffee is served boiling. I offered to remake it, she said, and make it actually hot this time. Like, I need it steaming. I explained German coffee standards focus on optimal drinking temperature rather than scalding. She replied, "That's ridiculous. Coffee should be so hot you have to wait to drink it. That's how you know it's fresh." She claimed American coffee culture understands quality because Starbucks, Dunkin', and every diner serve coffee at maximum heat. I remade her latte. She took another sip and said it was better but still not hot enough. She asked if we had a microwave so she could heat it herself. I said no. She said, "Of course not. German cafes are stuck in the past." She left the drink on the counter and walked out. I drive a taxi in Dusseldorf, and I picked up an American couple going to the airport. They asked if I could speed up because their flight was in 90 minutes. I was going exactly the speed limit. The man said, "Can't you go faster?" In America, everyone drives 10 or 15 miles over the limit. That's the real speed. I told him German drivers follow the posted limit. He said, "So you're telling me you're going to make us miss our flight because of some technicality?" I explained that I'm following the law and that 90 minutes is plenty of time. He responded that American taxi drivers understand urgency and bend rules when necessary. His wife chimed in that in California, people treat speed limits as suggestions because everyone knows traffic cops don't care unless you're going 20 over. They insisted German driving culture was too cautious and that efficiency requires risk-taking. The man said, "If this was New York, you'd be weaving through traffic right now." I dropped them off with 75 minutes to spare. He didn't tip. Before getting out, he said I should reconsider my overly strict driving because I'd get more business if I drove like Americans. I'm a Deutsche Bahn conductor on the route between Berlin and Leipzig, and an American passenger asked why we stopped at every scheduled station. He said this train would be so much faster if you just skipped the smaller stop. Nobody's getting on anyway. I explained that regional trains serve all communities along the route. He replied, right, but in America, express trains exist because time is valuable. You guys should have express and local options like New York. I told him we do have express trains, but this particular service is regional. He said, then why'd you let me buy a ticket? Someone should have told me this train makes 12 stops. I mentioned the schedule was clearly displayed when he booked. He responded that German rail systems lack transparency because American systems list express versus local prominently. He spent 20 minutes explaining how Amtrak, despite being slow, at least has clear designations between train type. When we arrived in Leipzig 15 minutes late due to construction, he asked for a refund because the delay proved German trains weren't as punctual as advertised. My sister works at a Stuttgart City Information Center, and an American tourist came in holding a map asking how far Neuschwanstein Castle was. She told him about 3 hours by car or train. He said, so like 45 minutes? She clarified that it's roughly 300 kilometers. He replied, oh, so like an hour 15, hour 30 max if you're driving normal speeds. She explained that even on the Autobahn, with traffic and route conditions, it's closer to 3 hours. He said, that doesn't make sense. In Texas, 300 kilometers would take 90 minutes top. European roads must be really inefficient. He insisted American infrastructure makes long distances shorter because highways are designed better. She showed him the route on the map with all the smaller roads involved. He said, why would anyone take those roads? Just take the highway the whole way. She pointed out that highways don't connect every destination directly. He replied that Germany should build more highways then, and that American highway systems prove comprehensive networks work better. He left to rent a car. I heard later he arrived at Neuschwanstein 4 hours later because he refused to follow the GPS and tried to find a faster route. I work at a rental car office in Cologne, and an American customer got angry when I told him he couldn't rent our car for a day trip to Paris and back. He said, what do you mean? It's just France. It's not even far. I explained that cross-border rentals require different insurance. He replied, that's insane. In America, you can drive a rental from California to Nevada, Arizona, anywhere, no extra paperwork. I told him Europe has different countries with different rules. He said, yeah, but the EU made it all one thing, right? So it should work like the US where state borders don't matter. I clarified that EU countries retain separate legal systems. He argued that Germany was being unnecessarily bureaucratic and that Europe should standardize car rentals like America did across states. He said, this is why Americans think Europe is complicated. You guys make simple things hard. He asked if he could just not mention he was going to France. I said no, because if something happens, the insurance won't cover it. He said, nothing's going to happen. I'm a great driver. He finally accepted the cross-border insurance after 15 minutes of negotiation. When he returned the car 3 days later, he'd driven to Belgium too. The additional insurance surcharge was €90. I manage a small guest house in Rothenburg ob der Tauber, and we had an American couple check in. They were scheduled for arrival between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. They showed up at 6:45 p.m. I'd been waiting since 3 p.m., rearranged my evening, and watched the sun set over the medieval walls. When they finally arrived, the husband said, sorry we're late, we stopped for photos in every village along the way. But hey, we're here now. I mentioned their confirmed arrival window. He replied, yeah, but that's flexible. Nobody actually expects people to show up in a 2-hour window. That's just a general idea. His wife added that American hotels never care what time you arrive as long as it's the right day. They spent 10 minutes explaining how rigid time expectations create unnecessary stress, and that German hospitality would improve if we relaxed a little. I showed them to their room. The next morning, they came down for breakfast at 9:45 a.m. Breakfast ended at 9:30 a.m. The man said, "Can't you just put out some more food? We're only 15 minutes late." I told him the kitchen is cleaned and closed. He said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about." In America, continental breakfast stays out until at least 10:30 a.m. because people wake up at different times. Before they checked out, they left a review saying the Guesthouse had unreasonable time restrictions and suggested future guests manage their expectations for German inflexibility. They gave us 3 stars.